This video came about as a result of a conversation I had with Steve from Steve's Games YouTube channel. He said he still watched my top 100 and perhaps I should do a top 100 worst games. I said I couldn't do that, but I might be able to do a top 10 games I don't get on with. Games that other people love or are highly regarded, but I just can't play for some reason. Steve said that would be cool. So I looked and realised I could only really find 7, so here they are. According to Spectrum Computing, Avalon was released in 1984 by Houston Consultants and was written by the genius that is Steve Turner. The original price was $7.95, which was quite steep for a game back then, but for a game of this depth it was well worth it. I really do want to like this game, and in another universe I'm sure I do. Probably at the expense of one of my top 10 games, perhaps Starquake or Rex. The reason I name those games is that they take a lot of time to get into and master, and I feel like this game is like that. And the truth is, I just don't have the time anymore. Just look at how infrequently I post videos on YouTube these days. I can see why people love this game so much and have recommended it to me many times in the past. It looks really good and movement control is really responsive. While I've never got that far into the game, I can see it has a lot of depth. So why don't I get on with it? Well, other than the movement, I find the controls really clunky. Selecting the spells is just difficult, particularly as I'm older now and my fingers just aren't as nimble as they were when I was a teenager, or my eyes are sharp. The next problem I have is that it didn't take me long to realise that I need to run away from all the baddies, at least at the start of the game. When I have that many baddies on screen, I want to kill them. Watching the RZX archive walk through this game, the start of it looks like an episode of Benny Hill. Okay, later you can zap baddies, but by then, I hate to admit, I was getting a bit bored. Avalon looks really great and the movement is done really well. The main character and baddies are animated beautifully, but I just can't get into it, and I've tried many times. I'm going to stop saying according to Spectrum Computing from now on, but all my details and year of release etc. are from there. Trantor Nog was released in 1984 by Gargoyle Games, written by Greg Follis and Roy Carter. I know this is considered a great game, it got a crash smash, and loads of people like it, but I just find it boring. Whenever I play it, exactly the same thing happens. Initially I'm stunned by how good the main sprite looks. That huge figure with smooth animation looks amazing. He walks in a realistic way, and if someone told me they'd used rotoscoping on the sprite, I wouldn't be at all surprised. I start to walk around and straight away find an axe. Great, I can use that. Then I wander around some more and through a very samey landscape. Sometimes I find other things. Sometimes the name of the place changes. And sometimes I get killed and sent back to the start. That appears to be the whole game. I have no idea what to do or how to progress in the game. The RZX walkthrough of this game is 1 hour and 45 minutes long. That's a huge amount of time to play this game. Reading the instructions doesn't really help, and there is this worrying message in it, as you may appreciate that a complete solution may take months or perhaps years. I like games where you have to explore, I like games where there are puzzles to solve, and if I bought this back in the day, I think I would have put time into figuring it out. I didn't get it back in the day, and now, when I go to it, I just don't have time to get into it. With Avalon, I want to like it. I don't even want to like Trantor Nog. Chase HQ was released in 1989 by Ocean Software. It received 95% in Crash, so it was a Crash Smash. Now I think this one might be a bit controversial, but let me explain. By 1989, I wasn't really playing Spectrum games anymore. My first experience of Chase HQ was the arcade machine, and I instantly fell in love with it. There was a Chase HQ machine in the bar of my hall of residence at university, and I put a lot of money into that machine. The machine was a bit old and battered and abused, but you could still have a good game on it. I remember the first time I got through the first round, then I almost got the second car. By the time they replaced the machine, I think with Final Fight, another one of my favourite arcade machines, I'd managed to get to the 4th stage. I got back into the Specky when emulation started, first playing the classics from my day, Attic Attack, Manic Miner, Chucky Egg etc. Then I started to look at the games I hadn't played that were rated highly, and this was one of them. The first time I played it, I hated it. It looks good, but it just isn't the arcade machine. Since then, I've come to appreciate what an amazing feat of programming it is. My choice is always going to be the arcade machine over the Spectrum version though. Playing it now, I can point to one thing that spoils it for me. The other vehicles on the road are just too big. I'm guessing that given the resolution on the Spectrum, they couldn't translate them exactly as they were on the arcade machine. Getting past those other vehicles is just harder than it should be. I can see why this is hailed as a great game on the Specky, and it's a very accurate conversion of the arcade machine, but it just isn't for me. Ghostbusters was released in 1984 by Activision, and is, of course, a film licence. I'm a huge fan of the film. It's fun from start to finish, and never takes itself too seriously. Crash only gave the game 60%, and I think that's about fair. One critic said, "After seeing the £10 price tag, I was expecting something as good as the film. Unfortunately, this is not the case." It isn't even very well presented. It uses the standard Spectrum font, for goodness sake. Even the keys aren't right. QAOP great, but then Z to fire? It's like they weren't even trying. The game includes sampled speech, a nice big Ghostbusters logo, and an OK beeper rendition of the theme tune. Not as good as the Commodore 64's, apparently. All of that must have taken a big chunk of memory, reducing how much was left over for the actual game itself. At the start of the game, you need to buy a load of equipment to enable your ghost busting. The use of an account to allow you to build up your money over multiple games at least gives some replay value, if you want to replay it, that is. Once you have your equipment, you have to wait for buildings to flash so you can drive to them and catch the ghost. The driving section is boring, mostly consisting of empty road with an occasional ghost you can try to capture. The only part of the game which I'd even call a game is when you get to a building with a ghost. Then you drop a trap, position your men, fire up your backpacks, and try to herd the randomly moving ghost into a position to be captured. The worst part about this is that randomly moving ghost, which can sometimes get stuck in one corner and never comes close to your trap. You get $500 for capturing a ghost, so how will you ever make back the $10,000 loan the bank gives you at the start is beyond me. It's a stark lesson in economics. Ghost busting just isn't a viable business. Unlike the film, this game does take itself too seriously. I wanted to get straight down to busting ghosts, and the game puts too many obstacles in the way. At the start of the game, you were just waiting for a call to come in, and at the end, the city goes crazy with ghosts, and you can't get to them all. If there'd been more ghost catching with different types of ghosts to catch needing different tactics, this might have been a good game. As it stands, it's not worth playing. Underwurlde was released in 1984 and published by Ultimate Play the Game. Not counting Martinoids and Bubbler, there are two Ultimate games I don't get on with. This one and Nightshade. Underwurlde received a crash smash with 92%, slightly lower than Nightlaw which received 94%. In the crash review, one critic said, "The frustration level in this game is pitched about right." Really? Are you having a laugh? Or just some gaming god that can instantly play any game perfectly? In the very same review, the game is compared to Bugaboo the Flea, and that's another game I just find far too frustrating. It is the jumping in this game that makes it so frustrating. The enemies don't directly kill you, they just bounce you off whatever platform you're on, and if you fall around a screen and a half, then you are dead. Believe me, when you're playing this game, you will fall to your death many times. The game is a side-on platformer where you need to navigate around a castle and caves and find various weapons to kill various guardians to find one of 3 exits. Interestingly, each of the exits promises a different adventure next: Nightlaw, Pentagram, or the unreleased mysterious Mire. In its favour, I will say this game does have that usual Ultimate polish. The graphics are beautiful, with minimum of colour clash. I've completed this game once, many years ago, before I recorded my games to put on YouTube. I do remember that after putting in some time, you do start to get a feeling of where and when to jump, making the game at least possible. I might be able to master it again, but the truth is, I just don't want to. Ultimate are by far my favourite ZX Spectrum software house, closely followed by Beyond. But even Ultimate had to have some games that didn't come up to scratch. I will give one more compliment to this game though. It has the best advert poster of any game released on the Spectrum. That advert promised so much, but sadly the game just doesn't deliver, at least not for me. Herbert's Dummy Run was released in 1985 by Microgen and is the fourth in the Wally Week series. It was written by David Perry, and I think I remember reading in an interview with him that he based it on the Pyjama Armor engine. With Herbert's Dummy Run, it isn't so much that I don't get on with this game, it's more that, after Pyjama Armor and Everyone's a Wally, I didn't see the need for any more of these games. I love Pyjama Armor and Everyone's a Wally. I particularly liked the character swapping element of Everyone's a Wally. I thought it took the gameplay to a new and interesting level. Then along comes Herbert's Dummy Run and it felt like a step backwards. Having played it again now and watched the RZX playback, it really is just more of the same. If I'd never played Pyjama Armor, I'm sure I'd like it. One thing I really don't like about the game is that the mini arcade games are a necessary part of it. I don't want mini arcade games as part of my arcade adventure. I just want to have some fairly logical puzzles where I find objects that do things to progress the game. It isn't that this is a bad game, it's just that I don't feel it adds anything new to the genre. Going back to Underwurlde and the Saberman games, at least most of them were different in some way. Saberwolf was a top-down maze game, Underwurlde was a side-on platformer on steroids, Nightlaw was an isometric arcade adventure. Okay, Pentagram was more of the same, but the series went downhill there anyway. I've never even tried playing 3 Weeks in Paradise, but I'm betting it's more of the same again. Bomb Jack was released in 1986 and published by Elite. The game was written by Paul Holmes, Andy Williams and Karen Truman, and is one of the best arcade ports on any 8-bit machine. So if it is so good, why is it on this list? When I look back at my top 100 games, Bomb Jack is at number 80, with games like GB Limited, Booty and Psst above it. Those are good games, and if all I'd ever played was the Spectrum version of Bomb Jack, it would be higher. Like Chase HQ, I'm a huge fan of the Bomb Jack arcade machine. In fact, at any retro event, or when I've been to Arcade Club, Bomb Jack is always the first machine I look for. Unlike Chase HQ, I did play Bomb Jack on the Spectrum before playing the arcade machine. When I got Bomb Jack, after saving my paper round money for around a month, I loved it. I really loved the game mechanic of super high jumps and using the jump button to hover. My mission on every screen would be to get 23 sparkling bombs and that 50,000 point bonus. Then I discovered the arcade machine and was blown away. I already knew how to play the game from the Spectrum version. This was just so much better. It is faster for a start, reminding me of that manic can't stay still feeling of Chucky Egg after level 8. Control is so much better in the arcade machine, you can hover for longer and you can just do things that you can't on the Spectrum version. Now when I go back to the Spectrum version, I feel it is slow and the controls clunky. In short, I've been spoiled by the arcade version, and unfortunately that means I don't get on with the Spectrum version anymore. Sometimes games that other people like or seem to like just aren't for you. The strange thing is, I've actually enjoyed going back and playing all of these games, at least for a little while. But in every case, I was reminded of why I don't get on with them. Then of course, there are some people who don't get on with my favourite games. Lords of Midnight isn't universally loved. Some people can't get into Elite, and while Alien 8 is the best isometric 3D game on the Spectrum, not a lot of people seem to think that. So in the end, my conclusion is, we're all different, we all like different games, but I think that's a good thing.